Hello, everyone. Welcome to the M&A, and thank you very much, Step Forward, for the invitation. My name is Mircea, and I'm currently in Guatemala, enjoying some sunny weather and working online from here. My focus is on the startup ecosystem in Romania, where I work with acceleration programs, and I do various consultancy for startups, and I work as well with venture capital and angel investors with the aim to help them connect with investors, and as well to connect. To make a connection between investors and startups with the point of fundraising. In the past, I founded Cluj Startups community in Cluj, and on the other side, I have been involved in Fresh Blood health tech organization in Spheric, which is an accelerator in Cluj. In Transylvania Angels Network, and in Cluj AI and FinTech Camp. Each of these are non-profits, but my full-time focus is on Activize, where we provide consultancy and fundraising services for startups and venture capital funds. So this being said, I think we can jump with the first question. How should a startup go about comparing different business models and choosing one that fits? I think the business model itself depends a lot on the focus of the startup and what it does. So it could be consumer oriented, or it could be B2B. The best way to do it, I would say, there are a couple of points that should be mentioned here. On first, depending if you're B2C or B2B, what is important is to see what happens in the industry, in your area, how other startups or companies are selling their products, because there's no point in reinventing the wheel while you can learn from their experience. And you can look on the websites, you can look at the pricing, you can look at the way how they promote and how they make the money, or you could maybe have access to some inside information as well, and this can help you understand what to apply in your startup. So learning from what already exists in the market, it's a good way to go, because usually what goes on the market, it's what actually works, and you could take from there. Of course, you could tweak it, you could play with it, you could adapt it, and definitely you should filter it through your experience and your product and business vision, because otherwise it doesn't make too much sense to reinvent the wheel. And to copy, because you need as well some extra advantages, which and a stronger value proposition that what happens in the industry than your competition, and this can be reflected in the business models. For example, in terms of business model and pricing, I was comparing the past week Asana and ClickUp. ClickUp is a new tool, and it has a better fitting business model for smaller teams. And we decided to switch from Asana to ClickUp just because the business model was more convenient for us. And as well about business model, what I think it's very relevant is to talk with the potential customers and to see the reaction to the business model, to your proposal, to your pricing proposal, because once you have this feedback from them, you will see that if you talk with 10 of them, probably the feedback will repeat, and this makes it much more realistic. And then slowly you could generalize to a bigger chunk of potential clients. And I think if you talk with 10 to 20, that can be quite enough in order to discover a good recipe and something that is convenient as well for them. As well, on the business model, there was a very interesting video from Y Combinator sharing about how to set pricing, and one of the videos were about how to share pricing, and I can share the links in the Facebook chat in the comments afterwards. And second, another one about 9 business models that a startup can have from Y Combinator as well. And basically they list a set of business models that you can actually see what fits for your startup, depending on your focus, your industry, your customer persona, and so on. Yeah, so on this question, this would be my answer. How do you validate your business model? How do you validate your pricing strategy? So from this perspective, what I think it makes a lot of sense is to talk with your customers, to potential customers or people who have experience in the industry. My favorite validation technique is interviews. And in the interviews, I find a lot of people, because it's a call or a face-to-face discussion with potential customers. And these folks can actually share with you a lot of insights if you are able to listen to them and ask the right questions. And I encourage that quite a lot, because it actually brings a lot of insights from their experience, practical experience about dealing with the problem and trying to find solutions in this area. So to the solutions to the problem that you're actually trying to solve. And in this context, I think it matters a lot to have validation from them. Having a couple of calls, discussions like 10 to 30, it brings a lot of confidence in this. I saw a startup in 2013-14, which was doing a lot of pricing validation as well in online, testing the price elasticity, in the sense that they were doing A/B tests on the website with various pricing levels, and then they could see what was the most interesting pricing from them, and how the demand was going down while the pricing was growing. So I think from this perspective, it is very relevant to play with A/B test as well, if you have the chance, and see how they react to various prices. Of course, after you talk with them, after you get a sense from the interviews, from the face-to-face or the one-to-one calls. Another topic in the pricing strategy is to see what goes in the industry, and how other startups are doing, as I said to the first question. And one more relevant thing in the pricing setting is to see how much money, especially in the B2B, do you save them for their client by them using your product. So usually in the B2B area, there is a budget for solving a problem, but actually you could solve that problem for them and have at a lower price than their budget. Then it's that can be a winning strategy, because they are budgeted in the company, and they actually have money to spend on things that sort the problem. So that's why you could easily catch them as a client if you tap into that budget. Another thing to keep in mind is the cost-based pricing versus the value-based pricing. So you have in mind your cost for delivering the product with all the costs included in the startup, and then you have the value that is perceived by the customer, and somehow the pricing should be somewhere in between those two. There is a theory, and I can post again an article and video about it, a theory about the value-based pricing versus cost-based pricing. So let's jump to the next question. Should a startup try to aim for a recurring revenue stream as opposed to a transaction model? Well, I can tell you from the investment venture capital perspective that a lot of the investors are looking for a recurring revenue stream, because this gives predictability in the market. So if you know the customer acquisition cost, and then if you know the revenue, you have clarity on how much money you can make over a client, and how much is the lifetime, and how much is the lifetime value, like how much money you make from them using the product. So let's say a user or a company has a lifetime of 2 years, and the lifetime value of those is 2 years, which means 24 months multiplied with the recurrent monthly pricing or yearly. So you can see how much you can get from a client, and you can average this, and then you can compare it with your cost of acquisition to see how much money. So you might make it might cost you $50 to $100 to have someone a new client who's a good client, and that person or that company to use the product for 2 years, and you make $1,000 during that. So this is quite a viable business model. because the revenue is much higher than the cost of acquisition, the revenue generated per client. So from this perspective, having predictability from a recurrent revenue model, it makes sense. It makes sense a lot, because it helps you grow faster, it helps you budget things better, it helps you create the engine, the mechanism which is actually creating the value, the growth of the startup itself. In the transactional business model, which usually applies to marketplaces, it's more tricky because you need to predict how often will the users come on the platform to use the platform. So they come transactionally, they come once, they do a transaction, and then they leave. And they might come in a month, or they might come in a 6 months period, but you don't necessarily have data from this perspective. And it's hard to predict at the beginning, and only after a while you know that in average someone might come and use your platform and have transactions on this I don't know, 5 times a year, for example. But it's harder to predict from the beginning. Only when you have some steady growth you can actually make this accurate prediction. So I would go for recurrent revenue, because that gives more stability. And on the other side, the transactional model, it's more risky and less predictable. Yeah, next question. Do first-time founders usually have a fear of pricing their product too high? I think it's a good challenge for founders, especially the ones who are technical founders, that they're not so salesy and business oriented, because you have a hard time asking for money. And that's part of the let's say a mental psychological education, to know your worth and to value yourself more and your work, in order to ask for money straightforward. And in the end, you want to build a business which has a steady revenue model and profit, and not to have people using your product but not paying. So I see this fear in many people at the beginning. I think this can be overcome by discussing with the potential clients and testing various pricing models and pricing levels. And it's okay to ask for a higher price, but then learn from the feedback that you have and then adapt. Or the other way around, if you think a price, you think the price is X, but then you realize that people pay. There is that the clients pay. They're quite open to pay. There is a theory saying as well. That's another resource that I can post in a follow-up comment on Facebook. What happens is that you could increase the price every time 5%, until you see that there is a little bit of churn from the paying people, or there are comments against the pricing, because like this you slowly go towards the value, the accurate value that they perceive in terms of pricing and in terms of appreciating your model. And of course, it's also the concept of quality clients. So not everyone who uses the product is a quality client for you, because they have all kinds of comments. They use the product randomly. There is no predictability in this. And you, as a startup, you're looking for the quality clients, the ones who are using your product steadily, and they are using willing to pay, and they are happy about that. So in time, you should go towards having clients which are seeing a lot of value in the product, and have less clients or users who are not that much valuing the product, because they consume the resources anyway. They can overwhelm the customer support and so on. So that's why it's also a customer quality focus that you should keep in mind. And I've seen startups who at first were addressing the market in general, let's say the mid-level market in the B2B area, but then they slided towards the corporates, because they saw that they can bring more benefits there, and the corporates were appreciating more the product, and as well the corporates could have a higher budget to pay them than the smaller clients who are actually complaining about a lot of stuff, but they were also paying less. So, for a B2C product, how do you choose the part of the product you should offer for free, and what should be paid? So for a B2C, the product, the theory goes that it matters a lot to have a lot of users, and to have people who are engaged with the platform. And the freemium consumers are usually less inclined to less inclined to pay. And that's why it's the freemium model in which they have access for free, and afterwards they pay from a certain moment on for advanced features. And what happens here is that a very small percentage of the people are actually playing, and you have to take this into consideration when you're having a B2C product. I would say that in the consumer area, or not necessarily consumer area, but also small businesses who have this upfront, who have freemium, for example, like Asana, there is a base feature which is quite important and lets you do the job done through that product. So those 1, 2, 3 base features, or the base activity to be for free, to create a lot of engagement. And then on the more the person uses the product and the more it gets used to the product, that person, then you can switch towards the free, towards the paid features. They could switch towards the paid features, and you try to push them towards that area. But I don't think there is a clear recipe. So you have to think how much, how many features, the fewer possible, can you give for free in such way that the users are still engaged with the product and they use it satisfying, but at the same time you don't give too much for free. So they have to do the job done at the base level, but then the difference, the things that are extra and they might need when they become advanced users, they should actually pay it. They should actually start paying it. But from this perspective, I think the consumer startups are more appealing in the markets, or to a segment that is more into the digital online payment, and they're used to using tools frequently. So about B2C, I think is very relevant that the user comes and uses the product a couple of times a week in order to become relevant, and only afterwards you could think about them paying. Going on to the next question. What are best practices for pricing when dealing with large enterprise clients? So I think some of them I mentioned previously in the previous questions. One, I think in enterprise clients, in terms of pricing, it's good to have insights in the market, like advisors, or if you have worked in the industry and you can understand how much were the budgets there for specific actions, activities, or jobs to be done in the company. Usually the companies are not too transparent about the budgets they have, and they sometimes play a game of negotiations and sales because of various internal discussions or decisions. So I think for a startup, it's relevant to have people in the industry connected with the enterprise in order to get relevant feedback, hands-on, truthful feedback, not something that you get from someone who doesn't want to be transparent about what's happening behind related to the budgets and to the use of the product. That would be the key thing that I could say about enterprise. Another thing about enterprise clients is that it takes time, and it's important for you to build connections with them and to have a credibility in the market. So I think the pricing is less of a concern, but there are many trust issues, and building a connection and making sure that those people that can take accurately the decision of buying from you. Especially that there is as well competition in the enterprise space, and especially that they have all kind of regulations or criterias about buying, and it's important for you to understand those criterias as well and to try to check them. I think a lot of enterprises have security concerns, and that's why you have to check this box when it comes to security. And as well, in terms of pricing, what happens in the enterprise area that not necessarily the user, not all the time the user, and most of the times the user is not the one who buys the product. So you have to satisfy for example, the user, need with the features, but as well the budget need when it comes to the buyer, who's probably it's a CFO or a budget manager or a manager of a team. And as well there is the third stakeholder, who could be security team or IT team or integration team with various tools. So you have to take care of each of the stakeholder and each of their concerns. Yeah, going on to the next question. What metrics are relevant to track that can help you figure out if your pricing strategy is working? So the metrics, I think it's quite obvious. It's about the customer acquisition cost that you should take in consideration. That's more on the marketing and sales part. Then it's as well the lifetime of a user, of a client, and then the value that that client brings in terms of revenue, as I said earlier. As well, I think the engagement and how often they use the product, it's also relevant. For the enterprise area is how many people they onboard on the platform. So it's not just about the user, probably it's about the team. And you should see that, for example, in project management tools and various tools like this, usually the enterprise clients start with 5, 10, or with a smaller team, and then they grow the team and they add more people and they recommend this. So when you see that more users from a company or more other departments are creating an account on your platform and they start paying and increases the packaging, this means that they are satisfied by the product and by what you do. So I think the revenue per generated per user is very important in terms of this. The customer acquisition cost, as I said earlier, the lifetime value has to be kept into consideration. And as well, it's not just about the numbers. I think it's also the qualitative feedback. So to get feedback from them to see how satisfied they are besides the number, and spot early problems. This I think is very important as well, to spot problems that they might have related to the product early on. Yeah, 8. Question number 8. What are the mistakes that you see first-time founders usually make when choosing their business model? Well, I think the first mistake is not thinking about the business model that much, which I saw often in the past, but now lately things are changing in the past 2-3 years. I think pricing strategy is usually not done well at the beginning and not researched enough, and usually you fail with the pricing in the beginning. And as well, I failed with my products. Even in the past months, I realized that for a product that we're selling, we have to shift our pricing and business model because the reaction was not too good from clients, and we need to lower the price on one side and decrease as well the features and the benefits that we offer. Other things, they don't have clarity in explaining the business model, and they don't have clarity in explaining the benefits of the product. So I'm talking, you should see the difference between features on one side and benefits on the other side. So features are the things that you provide in your product, but the benefits are the value that the client gets from those features. So you should speak with the client in the benefits first, and then in the features, because he wants to get a job done for your product, and that's why the features will help, but he needs to correlate the job to be done with the benefits that you offer and how is this sorted out through the features, but not necessarily the features should be put up front, but because you have to show the client what he gains from it. Yeah, so this is it with the 8th question. Let's take the 9th, which is in the making from the public. If you figure out you should change the business model, how difficult is it to change your business model after your clients have got used to it? Are there some downsides to this process? Yeah, so I think if the users, if the clients are used to it, definitely there will be some complaints, but this is about change management. And in the change management theory, you kind of try to tackle with the emotions and with the arguments that people could bring and try to prepare them for this. So it's a switch. Slow switch is not necessarily a trigger in which you do this switch on a platform and that announce them from before, make them aware, especially if you're enterprise and you have a couple of clients only. If you're a consumer, you can just send them an email upfront, as we see often that it happens a month or 2 months before, and try to gather feedback. But first thing, when you change something, it's good to have some informal feedback from some close clients with whom you could ask, and they could give a straightforward answer to you, no bullshit. There are some downsides. As I said, some people might drop, but you have to have a strong uh, clarity first internally in the startup team. Why do you change the business model? So to be anchored in this and assume, to be sure of this, and to assume that you're willing to change it even with some loss, so you could benefit on the longer term. Yeah, so I think this is it for this question. Before wrapping up, do you want to add up anything else? Yeah, I think the business model as well, and the pricing strategies, as well as the idea validation and product validation, it's a validation process. So you should actually think of this. I have assumptions that the business model would be this based on what I see in the market, that the pricing would be at this level, and you actually test it. And you could do some very cheap tests by just talking and asking feedback from various people and see what happens in the market. This is the first step that I would do. Afterwards, you could do more technical steps, technical testing or validation by playing with the pricing on the website, or by doing smoke tests, or by doing some surveys, if you want, um, or by what else? Asking directly the users by going into the place where they actually shop. I saw a startup actually, although selling online, they were actually going to shops who were selling similar products, and they were asking them, would you choose this version or this version with the features, and this is the pricing, and they were picking up, the user were picking up. So it's various ways to get feedback, and to be honest, it's quite easy. On the B2B side, I think LinkedIn is a good tool to approach and discover new clients and to get in touch with them. A lot of these client acquisitions are also happening on through recommendations and interviews setting up. So startups asking some advisors, getting advisors on board, and that advisor creating, like, doing 10-20 intros to potential clients and discussing informally with them. It's a transfer of knowledge from the advisor to the startup, transfer of trust, pardon, from the advisor to the startup, because the advisor is considered part of the team, and part of the trust that is between the advisor and the end client, it's actually transferable to the startup founders. So get people who are in the industry, who understand the industry, who can make connection, who can save you months just by going to the wrong direction. They can save you months, and you can correct faster just by having 1 hour call with them. But see this business model and pricing as a validation process. This is very important, in which you have an assumption and then you try to find if this assumption is true or not. Let's see, more questions. I think that's it. Yeah. Thanks a lot for having me here as well. Good to see you. And talk soon. Anytime you have questions, you can reach me out on LinkedIn, or by email, mircea@activize.tech. And in the comments section on Facebook Live, I will post the links to the videos, to the articles that I mentioned in the talk now. That being said, I guess we say goodbye.